Do you get bored of things that you see or hear too much of? Like a favourite song that you've listened to just a few too many times? My son is currently at an age where he finds a favourite song and he plays it over and over again until he gets bored of it. I have to be careful that he doesn't accidentally ruin any of my favourite songs in the process. But that problem isn't limited to music. It happened to me with IEMs. After reviewing so many budget IEMs over the years, I got a bit jaded about them. I spent so much time listening to mediocre IEMs that I didn't want to listen to my good IEMs anymore. And then I went to the Shenzhen International Audio Show, which was dominated by IEMs. It forced me to try a bunch, and I'm so glad that I did. Not only did I get to hear some great IEMs at the show, but I agreed to review some of them when I got home. As I started unboxing and listening to some of these models, I returned to a habit that I let go of some time ago, listening to music in bed before I go to sleep. I had forgotten that IEMs are speakers that you can take to bed with you. It does take a certain level of IEM in terms of performance to bring that analogy to life, but the Softears RSV Mk2s are one such IEM. When you get to an IEM of this performance level, they can create your own personal soundstage and a complete audio listening experience wherever you are. And the RSV Mk2s do all of that in a really interesting way. They use some very old technology in the form of a massive Knowles balanced armature bass driver that's been around since 1982. And that's paired up with a mid-range balanced armature driver that's almost as old. It's from 1988. Of course, there may have been some iterative improvements to those models over the years, but to me, the RSV Mk2s prove that it's not always about using the latest and greatest technology to get some fantastic sound. Sometimes it's more about the way the components are working together and how they've been tuned. And at $699 US, you would definitely want the RSV Mk2s to deliver exceptional sound. That's regardless of whatever's going on internally in terms of components. And deliver? They do. The intentions behind the RSV Mk2's design and tuning is to deliver a natural sound, and that is exactly where they excel. They deliver a sound that many will hear as being warm and full-bodied, and I would agree with that. But that doesn't mean that the Mk2s lack resolution or detail. Listening to Visions by Stevie Wonder with the RSV Mk2s, you can not just hear, but feel every one of the guitar strings being plucked. On Something So Right by Paul Simon, the vocals are still crisp, and you can hear every sense of attack on the stronger moments like the consonants in the vocals. Where the Mk2s really excel for me though, is in the sense of separation of sounds that they deliver in an expansive and spacious soundstage. They manage to just balance everything so well. Guitars are wonderfully articulate, but also resonant and rich. Vocals are full-bodied and placed fairly close to the listener, but they never sound congested, just present and natural. And a big part of the vocal performance from the RSV Mk2s comes from their sense of separation. Whilst the vocals are placed relatively close to you as a listener, there is so much sense of separation and space around all the individual instruments that nothing ever feels closed in or claustrophobic. In other words, everything has space to breathe. At the bottom end, the bass is full-bodied and probably a little bit enhanced from what's truly natural, but it has a nice sense of feel and rhythm to it, so it's not like it's slow or loose in any way. It may not be quite as fast as some other IEMs with much tighter, snappier bass, but I think it's just fantastic. When it came to pairings with the RSV Mk2, I was able to enjoy it just as much from the Chord Mojo 2 and the Chord Poly, or from the topping D900 and the topping A900. It did possibly go a little bit too far into warmth once I added the RSV Mk2s to the KN RU9 in its full-on tube mode, but just taking the RU9 from its classic full tube mode back to its more hybrid modern mode was just right to bring the RSVs back into balance and a wonderful natural experience. And this is probably a good time to mention something else about the RSV Mk2s that's very hard to quantify or measure. A part of their design uses a passive armature. That's kind of like a passive radiator on a speaker, but it's working quite differently in the RSVs. That passive armature is directly connected to a little hole on the faceplate of each of these IEMs, and it's intended to help reduce any sense of fatigue and to improve the bass texture and the overall tuning of the IEMs by dynamically reducing pressure in the ear canal. I can't say exactly if it does or doesn't work, because I don't have the ability to compare how these sound with an otherwise identical IEM that doesn't have the vent. But what I can say about the RSV Mk2s is that they're incredibly comfortable, both in terms of a physical fit, but also the listening comfort and the lack of fatigue over long listening sessions. A part of that will also, of course, be the excellent selection of tips that you get in the box with these, and the wonderful cable that they come with too. The whole experience of unpacking, selecting the tips, and then using the RSV Mk2s is very much a premium IEM experience. And in fact, the cable that comes with the RSV Mk2s is so good that I prefer it with the Mk2s over and above some excellent cables from Effect Audio that I normally love. That being the Eros S Mk2 cable and the Dionysus cable, which is brand new. I adore the Eros S Mk2 cable from Effect Audio on almost every IEM I've ever connected it to, but I felt like with the RSV Mk2s it pushed the vocals just a little bit too far back, and it was less engaging for me than listening with the stock cable that comes with the RSV Mk2s. It also reduced the treble energy a little bit, and to me the treble is already so good and so refined and controlled on the RSVs that it didn't need to be pulled back at all. And so in that sense, the brand new Dionysus cable was probably a better match. It's also a better match aesthetically probably, because you're getting the beautiful black sheathing on the Dionysus cable to go with the all black design of the RSV Mk2s. The Dionysus cable still pulled back a little bit on the treble with the RSVs, but it was less pronounced than with the Eros S Mk2. The Dionysus also didn't steal as much weight and emphasis or presence away from the vocals, and so basically all it did was take a little bit of sense of weight and warmth or richness from the RSVs, and in the process it did further improve the sense of separation of all the sounds. And so if you're thinking that the RSVs sound like a really good fit for you, or you've heard them and you know they're a good fit for you, but that they're maybe just a little bit warmer than you'd like, the Dionysus cable is a really nice fit just to pull back on the sense of warmth and increase the sense of separation a little bit. And remember that whilst it is a significant investment in a cable like the Dionysus to go with an IEM at the price point of the RSV Mk2s, with the Connect system on the Effect Audio cables, you can always change the connection point at the earphones later. So if you get a different IEM with different type of pin or connection type, you can always change that around. So it's a cable that you can buy for life. And so I'll put a link through to Effect Audio if you're interested in the cables. But for now, I thought the RSV Mk2 was just perfect with its stock cable. I personally wouldn't change a thing. And so let's talk a bit more about IEMs and some comparisons to help you understand the RSVs better. At around about this $600 to $700 price point, there's some very strong competition. One of the few IEMs that I kept around when I sold off my collection was the Oriveti OH700VB. I love the sound of these and the fact that they've got a tuning switch on the faceplate to give them more or less bass as you want it. The OH700s are closest to the sound of the RSV Mk2s with the bass switch in the down position on the faceplate, and so that's the way I compared these two for my listening tests. And as I handled both IEMs, the first thing I noticed was that the RSVs clearly feel more premium than the very well made OH700s. As I then listened, it was very evident that the bass is enhanced more so on the OH700VBs at the bottom of their range. However, that bass on the OH700s also tapers away much faster as it moves up into the mid-bass and then on to the lower mid-range. As a result, it's the RSVs that have more sense of weight and presence in the mid-range and vocals. That's something that I personally prefer. And I also felt like having a bit less weight in the mid-range and into the upper bass exposed a little bit the fact that the OH700s are not quite as refined in the top end. The upper mids and the treble are just a little bit less well controlled from the OH700s compared to the very smooth and refined sound you get from the RSV Mk2s. As a result of their leaner mid-range tuning, the OH700VBs do produce greater separation of sounds, but it comes at the trade-off of the OH700s sounding a little bit less smooth. And so overall to my ears, the RSV Mk2s came across as sounding slightly better, slightly smoother or more refined, more controlled overall. And on top of that, they came across as more coherent. The whole sonic image felt like more one consistent piece. I still think that the OH700VBs are a very interesting and exciting and dynamic listen, but the RSVs brought everything together better for me into one coherent sonic picture and just enveloped me in the musical listening experience. And that's why, as I said earlier, the RSVs are an example of speakers that you can take anywhere with you, speakers that you can take to bed with you. They just create such a wonderful and immersive sonic image that you'll get lost in the music for hours if that's what you want to do. And so if you want that for yourself, I've put links in the description down below. And if you need a fantastic device to plug a pair of RSVs into, then you'll definitely want to watch the video I've pinned here at the end as your next port of call. For now though, a huge thanks to YouTube channel members, also to channel Patreon members, and of course to those of you who leave super thanks on videos like this one. And until next time, happy listening, be kind to each other, and I'll see you again soon on Passion for Sound.